Good afternoon, big girls. Today, we're going to be looking at 10 or so players that I think you're going to regret at this time next year not having drafted in Dynasty startups right now. Also, in advance, I apologize if the audio is crazy, but we've had construction people working on the fire escape outside of our office for legitimately like 7 business days straight. So I just said today I'm just going to bite the bullet and film it, and hopefully we could edit this in post. But if you hear weird buzzing in the background or something, that is why. But we continue on because that's what we do. We push through the adversity, and you're about to push through the adversity in your startup drafts because people aren't drafting these 10 players high because they're worried. They're scared. I'm here to tell you not to be scared, all right? And I came pre-tucked, so you know I'm not fucking around today. This video is coming off of the back of last week's video that I did talking about 5 players I regret not having drafted last year, right? And what we learned from them. This is going to be a little bit of a build-up on top of that. So if you missed that video, that will be down below. Go check it out. We had guys like Nico Collins, Trey McBride, why we missed them, and why we should have drafted them. We're going to do the same with the guys on this list. The first player on here is Mr. George Pickens, the Pittsburgh wide receiver. And I think with a guy like George Pickens, who is going right now 73rd overall in startup drafts, the wide receiver 29 on keep, trade, cut, feels a little bit criminal, okay? I think with him, with a lot of these players, right, it's very easy to get caught up in how you subjectively feel about a player's talent, about whether or not you think they are some great athlete or great at their position or whatnot. I think a lot of the times dynasty value ends up moving up and down so quickly based on the external factors, more so than the players themselves. If a player gets drafted, he goes to a shitty situation, we don't like him for a year or two, right? You can buy him later on or sell him, whatever the case may be. But a player goes to a great situation early on, their value rises. So a lot of times you want to find the guys that have bright spots in their profile that people don't love the situation of right now. So at this time last year, George Pickens was the wide receiver 30 in Dynasty startup drafts. And like I said, he's the wide receiver 29 right now, despite being a 23-year-old with a crazy athletic profile, someone that was supposed to probably get first-round draft capital, but had some injuries throughout college, and is now coming off his second straight impressive season in the NFL off of a 1,140-yard breakout season. So we got a dude who came in young, produced at a very young age, and we just don't want him for whatever reason. I think the narrative is he's not this like great separator, or he's inconsistent on the field. I don't know if you guys remember this, but like Tyler Lockett, he was considered extremely boomer bust. And then guess what? Then he had a season where he just put up 12 points per game. And then we're like, oh, he's the boring, safe wide receiver 3. And then the next year he was boomer bust. Like trying to find consistency in a 17-week window is insane. So take the players who just perform well over a long period of time. And the situation I love with George Pickens is it's pretty fucking obvious on the surface, so I'm surprised there's not more buzz behind him. They brought in 2 non-Kenny Pickett quarterbacks, all right, in obviously Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. I expect Russell Wilson to be the starter immediately, and when you look at Russ and you look at what he's become over, the last few years, it didn't really matter to me because of the fact that whoever was his wide receiver 1 was the guy getting a shitload of targets, right? We saw it with Cortland Sutton. We saw it with his guys in Seattle as well. George Pickens, to me, is going to be that top alpha without a doubt in this offense. And what I think is more important, and maybe this is more speaking to redraft, but if a player has a good redraft year, his dynasty value is going to skyrocket up, okay? And it's Diontae Johnson. He is a guy who has averaged over the last 4 years cumulatively 9 targets a game. Those are insane volume numbers that you see from so few wide receivers, okay? So you got a guy over the last 4 years averaging 9 targets a game. George Pickens coming off of a quiet breakout year of 1,140 yards, and now 150 targets are out of the way. Who the fuck's going to get him, all right? I get it. Some of y'all like Roman Wilson. I'm not a fan of his game. I don't think he's going to be a huge factor out the rip. Even if he is, that's plenty of targets to go George Pickens' way for him to be in that 130, 140, 145 target range. And maybe Arthur Smith will ruin this offense. But I will say, Drake London, in each of his 2 seasons under Arthur Smith, has had more targets than Pickens had last year in his breakout year, okay? London, clear wide receiver 1 in Arthur Smith's offense. George Pickens, clear wide receiver 1 in this offense. Again, London had more targets in both years than George Pickens just had last year. Now you have Diontae Johnson out the picture. So admittedly, I wasn't in love with Pickens as a prospect coming out. I didn't think like the A.J. Green upside comparisons were warranted whatsoever. But to me, this value is simply just like too good to pass up on, right? 106 targets last year. I really expect that to jump up to 130. And if his touchdowns go from like 5 to 8 he'll be a 24-year-old wide receiver coming off of 3 really strong seasons to start his career, and then he'll probably be like a top 15, top 18 dynasty wide receiver. And hopefully by next offseason, we have Pittsburgh figuring out their QB situation. Maybe Russ is better than we expected. Maybe they give Fields the chance to develop and he becomes something good. Maybe they just trade for a veteran next offseason, because that seems like the path that they're probably going to go down, because Pittsburgh is never really in a rebuilding state of mind. So it tells me that they're probably one of these teams where if one of these 2 QBs don't work out, they will probably try to go for another veteran quarterback. So Pickens, I'm in on. And honestly, staying in Pittsburgh, I'm going to rip Jaylen Warren as my next player that I think we're going to regret not buying right now at this time next year. His current ADP is 131st overall, the RB 27 per keep trade cut. And the reason I'm trying to invest into this Pittsburgh offense is, one, like Mike Tomlin's just a winner, but 2, most importantly, they're building their team from the inside out. They have now used back-to-back first-round picks on the offensive line, which was a clear glaring weakness for them for the last few years, and now they've invested heavily, so this thing will turn around rather quickly, all right? So they've used their first round last year, the first round this year, and now you want to start reaping the benefits of what they're investing into it as the skill players pertain to it. And the main point I made last video about like running backs that you want to be looking for in Dynasty, the ones that are really cheap, like why we should have drafted Zamir White last year, is we had this collective, this cohort of running backs that all got together last year that wanted contract extensions, that were like ready to hold out. The Austin Ecklers, the Josh Jacobs, the Saquon Barkleys, they're all gone, all right? Najee Harris, probably gone after this year. They did not pick up his 5th-year option, which does not mean that they're completely out on him. They want to see what he can do for their offense. Maybe he has another down year, but they want him to stick around. They give him a smaller contract. Again, though, the writing's probably fucking on the wall here. In my eyes, I think Jaylen Warren's a really good running back. This reminds me a little bit of like Austin Eckler sitting behind Melvin Gordon. Now, comparing anyone to Austin Eckler feels like a fool's errand. I think their games are extremely, extremely similar. So I'm a big fan of Jaylen Warren as a talent, but I'm also trying to take the situation into effect here. Jaylen Warren will be a restricted free agent next offseason. Najee Harris is an unrestricted, so he could sign anywhere. That makes it way easier for the Pittsburgh Steelers to just bring him back if they want to. And I can't imagine they're going to let both of their running backs walk, where Warren's probably a much cheaper option for them to bring back. And I think he's way more realistic to get brought back. He's already shown success in this offense. He's already shown the capability to handle 45 to 50% of the touches in this backfield. He's explosive. He's a good pass catcher. He can operate on third downs. Like, I really like what Warren brings to the table. And you are spending a end of 10th, 11th, maybe he falls into the 12th in your startup round pick on his ass. Going into that same vein, something super, super similar, Chase Brown, all right, the running back for the Cincinnati Bengals right now, his ADP is RB 38, 164th overall. So now you're starting to get into like the 14th round of startup drafts. And listen, I mean, I know they signed Zach Moss. They let Joe Mixon walk. They signed Zach Moss to be his replacement, and they can easily get out of that contract after 1 year if it doesn't develop. Chase Brown, when you look at his profile, he was a 5th-round pick, so there weren't a ton of people excited about him. But just like a raw look at his profile, 5'10", about 210, his athleticism is crazy. He's fast, he's bursty, he's agile, he's strong. And he earned a ton of play time down the stretch last year. So you look at this split on the screen. On the left side is from weeks 13 to 18. So, you know, the end of the season. On the right side is the beginning of the season when he wasn't playing much. The opportunities weren't necessarily crazy, even over the last 6 weeks of the season. But either way, it was just good to see him being a real part of this offense rather than us trying to project. Like, you could look at a dude like Evan Hull, where you're like, all right, there should be the opportunity there, but we didn't see shit from him last year. Chase Brown, at least we have some stuff on the resume and on paper that shows us that Cincinnati was willing to use him. He averaged 7 rush attempts, 2 targets, so 9 opportunities per game, and he turned that into like 53, 54 yards, which is pretty damn efficient. The important part here, of course, is just like Cincinnati's a good offense. They're going to move the ball. They're going to be looking to pass the ball a lot more this year, I think, without Joe Mixon there. So I think Chase Brown is clearly the pass catcher there in that backfield. And Mixon, man, we want to talk about how Deontay Johnson got a lot of opportunity over the last 4 years. Check this out. Joe Mixon, over the last 6 years, he has averaged over 20 opportunities per game. You very rarely see a streak like that for running backs in the modern day. So, listen, I shit on Mixon all the time. I don't think he's that talented of a running back. I don't think he's like anything special athletically. But this is the reason that the Bengals held on to him for so long and they kept him around and kept giving him opportunity after opportunity after opportunity because he could fucking handle it. He has averaged over 20 opportunities per game over the last 6 seasons. That is so much opportunity to be had in this backfield. If Chase Brown, who is really explosive, can average 10, 11, 12 opportunities per game, which I don't think is crazy, he will be a screaming value here. And then he'll get put into that like Tony Pollard conversation where we're just waiting like, when is Zeke going to leave? When is Zeke going to leave? When is Zach Moss going to leave? And then he gets that boost. All right, so if you're enjoying the video so far, give us a boost. Let us know that you like these types of videos. Let us know what you want to see going forward. We're about to transition heavily into redraft content. So if you play redraft content, make sure you subscribe to the other channel, just regular BDGE Fantasy Football. Myself, Adam, Andrew, will all be doing content over here. We won't let this channel, just fade into oblivion. We will continue to put out content here, of course, but the volume might scale down a little bit, especially in season. We'll be doing way more stuff on the redraft channel. So go subscribe over there. Hit the button down below, this one, if you like the video, and make sure you subscribe to this channel as well. Now, this is not a player, number 4 on the list, that I'm necessarily like super subscribed to in real life. I'd be starting to call my friends in real life subscribers, They get pissed about it. I make so many internet friends nowadays that like my real life friends, they're just like, I only got a few of them left, so I just start calling them subscribers, and if I keep doing that, I probably won't have any left by the end of this year. I don't know why I'm going off on that tantrum, but we'll go back to Josh Palmer. There's just no way those two things connected. Josh Palmer, the wide receiver out of Los Angeles Chargers, current ADP, 187th overall, the wide receiver 59. He's 24 years old, and it's no fucking secret that the Chargers just have an insane amount of targets available in this offense because Keenan, Mike Williams, Austin Eckler are gone. Over the last 3 seasons, they have averaged combined 313 targets per season. So much fucking opportunity, okay? So they're gone. And yes, they bring in a mosh fucking posh of J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards and Kamani Vidal and Ladd McConkey, who I think is a real playmaker, and Quentin Johnson. I mean, we'll get to him in a second, but I don't love Palmer necessarily as a player, but he's going to be a big part of this probably anemic passing offense, but the depth chart is just absolutely up for grabs. And I think over the last year or two, Herbert has for sure shown trust in Josh Palmer. I think this organization has shown trust in Josh Palmer as like a solid role player in this offense that could be the wide receiver too. It wouldn't surprise me if he led the team in targets. You have Quentin Johnson, who is a colossal bust. And I was ready to throw him on this list just because the opportunity cost is so low. But when you look at Matt Harmon's RP profile on Quentin Johnson, I very much suggest all you guys go subscribe to receptionperception.com. Quentin Johnson's success rate versus different types of coverage last year, percentile, and that is not first in the good way. That means 99% of players that he has charted up to this point in the 6-year history of reception perception have performed better than Quentin Johnson. This is quite literally one of the worst seasons of all time from a wide receiver. First percentile against man coverage, first percentile versus zone coverage, second percentile versus press coverage. We've got 0 sample for double coverage because who the fuck would double coverage Quentin Johnson when you don't need to do it? So you've got the colossal bust Quentin Johnson. We have no real pass catchers that will be healthy at running back. They don't have a real tight end either. And you have Ladd McConkey, who is obviously like a fun rookie coming in that a lot of us like. I took some shares of him in my Dynasty rookie drafts. He's the most expensive guy by far in that wide receiver group, but he's a guy that's had over 500 receiving yards just one time in college. So he's not a sure thing. So I just think that Josh Palmer addition to your teams in round fucking 15, 16 of startup drafts just makes way too much sense. And it's really easy production if you end up going like super young at wide receiver, but you need wide receiver 3 production in your lineup later on in the draft. Next up on this list, we've got my man's Dontayvion Wicks. Wide receiver out in Green Bay. Current ADP 158 overall. Wide receiver 60. Wicks was 3rd on the team in receiving yards last year. Like, we went into the year not knowing whatsoever how this fucking offense was going to play out, right? We had Christian Watson, who we assumed was going to be the alpha. They drafted Jaden Reed. They drafted Dontayvion Wicks. They had Romeo Doubs. They drafted both Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft. Like, we really had no fucking idea how this thing was going to play itself out. Wicks ended up being 3rd on the team in receiving yards over Watson. And I know people will be like, Watson's banged up. Watson played just 12 fewer snaps than Dontayvion Wicks did. And when you look at their ADP right now in Dynasty startups, Dontayvion Wicks is the 4th wide receiver drafted. Jaden Reed, rightfully, is the wide receiver 30 in startups. Christian Watson is 40. Romeo Doubs is 51. Dontayvion Wicks is wide receiver 60. And to be honest with you, by the time this video drops or within a week of it dropping, I expect Wicks to easily flip Romeo Doubs. I put this little chart together for you guys just to like give a more in-depth breakdown of the success of the wide receivers out there in Green Bay last year, just looking at target totals, reception totals, route participation. So this is like really where I want to drive the point home that Dontayvion Wicks was legitimately just good last year in the few opportunities that he got. He was third on the team in receiving yards. Again, let me echo that, right? Despite having by far and away the lowest route participation of the Green Bay wide receivers, playing the fewest snaps by far the wide receivers, the target quality rating, which is the column after snaps, Jaden Reed and Romeo Doubs saw really high quality ratings. Watson saw abysmal quality rating. I think a lot of that to do was probably because Watson's average depth of target is really far down the field, and naturally those are going to be a little bit less accurate. But again, Dontayvion Wicks produced despite having way fewer quality targets coming his way. He still led the team in yards per route run. I'm going to be honest, I don't even remember what that last fucking column is. FA yards per route run. Oh, formation adjusted yards per route run. So that takes into account like 3 wide receiver sets versus 2 wide receiver sets, and it's easier to get yards per route run when it's only 2, whatever the case may be. Just clearly, he had the fewest opportunity and did the most with the fewest opportunity in the receiving core. So there's no reason, in my opinion, that as a young player, a rookie last year, he should be the 4th Dynasty wide receiver off the board here. I think going into this year, we're still confused about how this depth chart's going to play out. We still don't know who the best receivers are here. I think we do know Jaden Reed's probably the best receiver here, but like this could play out anyway. Jordan Love steps up, goes for 4,500 yards. Dontayvion Wicks takes a step up and ends up being the 2nd most targeted receiver in this group. Romeo Doubs gets phased out. That could be a big time producer. I just think it's impressive for a guy who was a 5th rounder last year, competing against all these dudes who got way higher draft capital, either in the same exact draft, which tells you that the Packers said that they like those guys more, and then still let Wicks get more opportunity than them, broke into the receiving room, competing with Musgrave, competing with Kraft. And then again, going back to Matt Harmon's RP, like 71st percentile success rate versus man coverage, 69th versus press, almost 50th percentile versus zone. Those are really, really good numbers. And now you're attaching yourself to an ascending Green Bay passing offense with Jordan Love, 7th most passing yards last year, 2nd most passing touchdowns. And right now, he has the 6th best odds, the 6th highest odds to win MVP next year per Vegas. It is literally Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, CJ Stroud, Lamar Jackson, Jordan Love. All right, next players up on this list. I'm going to kind of go with like a combo here of a couple of quarterbacks that I think are cheap enough that they're worth just throwing onto the back end of your roster and hoping one of them gets an extra year of starting ability for you. And they are Gardner Minshew, the quarterback in Las Vegas, and Sam Howell, the quarterback that just got traded to Seattle to be Geno Smith's backup for right now. Now, Gardner Minshew right now is pick 190 overall in Dynasty Startups, quarterback 34. Sam Howell is pick 198, quarterback 35. With Minshew, I kind of see a lot of Baker Mayfield likeness going on here, okay? He's going over to a new situation with, in my opinion, listen, Antonio Pierce is like, yeah, Aiden O'Connell has earned the right to take first-team snaps. That is so far from being like he's our starter. I think if you watched any Raider football last year, simply put, AOC is not it. He's not the answer whatsoever for that quarterback situation. And Antonio Pierce is not a dude who is going to put his team in a position not to have the best chance to win, okay? So Gardner Minshew's going over there. I think he easily beats out Aiden O'Connell. A very similar thought process from last year when people were like, oh, Kyle Trask is going to be the starter there in Tampa Bay, not Baker Mayfield. I just don't think that's true whatsoever. He goes into a situation with Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, Brock Bowers. I think it's a better situation than the Indianapolis Colts last year. So I think Gardner Minshew can, 1, give you a full year of starter production right now. I think if he plays well, he could end up getting like a 2-year gap bridge extension in this offense. So I am very much okay grabbing Gardner Minshew all the way down to pick 190, which is like the 16th, 17th round. That's crazy to me. Same thing with Sam Howell. This dude is 23 years old. Now, he was awful last year from like a real NFL standpoint. He had great games. He had glimpses of like being great, more so statistically. Threw for almost 4,000 yards, but the protection rate out there in Washington, 23rd. He had the highest single number of pressured throws last year, 122. Geno's 33. He is very likely not the long-term solution here. They can get out after this season from Geno. They could save $12 million against the cap if they move on from him. I'll just throw this little tweet up here from Chad Forbes. He said, Seahawks Sam Howell is younger than Bo Nix and Michael Penix. Seahawks acquired Howell for virtually nothing. An interesting point that nobody's mentioned, things abruptly broke down between new Seahawks head coach Mike Macdonald and DC. Perhaps Macdonald liked Howell over the quarterbacks in that draft. Whole lot of speculation going on over here, but all in all, it was just a very good move, I think, by Seattle to give you a quarterback as a backup that has a lot of experience that maybe they give a chance to prove himself again in like a more NFL ready offense than what the Washington Commanders were last year. So the last guy I'm going to put on this list, and then I'm going to go through some like honorable mentions and just like situations that I think we should keep our eyes open to, where maybe you want to take some dart throws on certain teams and certain offenses and certain groups. The last guy I have on here is Jameson Williams, wide receiver out of Detroit. And you might have already watched our group video where we talked about buy, sell, holds of Jameson Williams. But right now he's currently ADP 133. So again, like a 12th round pick, 13th round pick, wide receiver 49. I just look at it as like he's a former first round pick that they spent heavy draft capital on. And everything has kind of just gone bad for him. Right now, he is now finally 2 years removed from his ACL tear. He's got no suspension coming into the year. And I think realistically, listen, they could have cut their losses with him, not cut him off the team, but they haven't added anyone to that wide receiver room of note, okay? Like they let Josh Reynolds walk, who I thought played really well for them. He had a very solid, like 600, 5-touchdown season for him last year. And what I mean cut their losses, like they could have went out and drafted a 3rd-round wide receiver, even like a 4th-round wide receiver that could have contributed immediately to the wide receiver room that would have taken away some opportunities from Jameson Williams. But they let Reynolds walk, and they got really nothing else there in the wide receiver room. It wasn't even until after their Week 9 bye last year that Williams had his first game of more than 50% of snaps. He just turned 23. They have 14 indoor games this year. What I'm hearing out of camp, like I'm not trying to put a lot of speculation into it in May training camp, OTAs type shits, but I'm hearing a lot of positive vibes from him. So at this price, I am very okay investing in an early 1st-round wide receiver that's 23 years old on a very good offense at wide receiver 50. All right, so that is my list. I don't even know how many guys I went to, but I think overall what you're looking for is uncertain situations. You're looking for quarterbacks that we don't really know whether or not they're going to be good, because if they are good, then that means some of the weapons that were being devalued in that offense are going to end up being good, or we're going to see their value spike as well. So one team that comes to mind, again, these are going to be a little bit of a rapid fire right now. I think of Denver. I think of Bo Nix. Now, Troy Franklin, I think, is probably the most expensive weapon here. Like, obviously, you don't want Courtland Sutton at this point. He's not a dynasty buy. Troy Franklin, I think, is a fine guy to have if Bo Nix hits. Troy Franklin probably hits. But why not Marvin Mims? Marvin Mims right now is probably getting drafted at like ADP 160 plus. And I was not a fan of him coming out last year. Was not drafting him in rookie drafts. I'm glad I kind of stayed away. Now I feel like the price is there where I don't feel terrible about it, because, again, if Bo Nix is good, Marvin Mims might be good. And Sean Payton clearly likes Marvin Mims, wants to get him more involved, hopefully, this year. So we'll see. I think Marvin Mims is one to keep an eye on. I think in Buffalo, right, everyone's hyped about Kincaid. Everyone's hyped about Keenan Coleman. I think some later round shots on Khalil Shakir and Curtis Samuel make a ton of sense. We don't know how that wide receiver group is going to play itself out. We have no idea who's going to lead the team in targets this year. I think Carolina is another situation that is worth targeting at where the prices of these guys are right now, because Bryce Young, everyone's down on him. What if he's just good? What if they just needed to add those offensive linemen? What if they just needed to add the weapons, and then he has his step-up year? He has his breakout year. Everyone likes Deontay Johnson. Everyone likes Xavier Leggett. But what about it? Honestly, even Adam Thielen at this point, probably pick like 180, 200. I don't mind trying to squeeze one more year out of Adam Thielen. But dudes like Jonathan Mingo, who I think are probably super far down the ADP list. What if Jonathan Mingo gets more opportunity this year? What if Jonathan Mingo breaks out? All those kind of things are, and I don't think it's going to happen, but that's why you get to pick these guys at pick 150, 170, 190, or later. I think one of the most obvious situations to start looking at and buying into is Drake May. And you know what? I actually want to put this guy on record. This was a rapid-fire round, but this guy is one more guy I want to add to the list. Everyone's excited about Jaylen Polk, 2nd-round pick. Everyone's excited about Javon Baker, 4th-round pick, which I think is good to be excited about. I like both of those players. What about Pop Douglas? What about Demario Douglas? All right, current ADP, 195 overall, 17th round. Okay, we're talking about the wide receiver 73. I think Pop Douglas ended up being what everyone thought Kendrick Bourne was going to be after week 1. To me, Pop Douglas is like the perfect complement to Jaylen Polk and Javon Baker, who are outside wide receivers that thrive on possession. Similar to Jacoby Myers when he was back in New England, Pop Douglas is not being talked about whatsoever because despite having a 50-catch, 600-yard rookie season as a very late-round pick, he scored 0 touchdowns. Now you have a new quarterback. We don't know who his favorite target's going to be. Pop Douglas is 23 years old. He runs a 4.44, legitimate NFL speed. To me, he showed us that he was a good receiver last year. Maybe a high-floor PPR player, but I want to attach myself to guys in Drake May's offense that we that have a price tag of the 17th round in startups. I like Bob Douglas a lot. He's an easy pick for me down there. I think maybe the last offense to look at would be Tennessee and Will Levis. I don't know what pieces you can really get for cheap. Like, everyone knows D-Hop, everyone knows Calvin Ridley with the new offense there. I think maybe the player to look at is Chiggy. Chiggy had a good rookie year, then kind of fell off last year because the offense just imploded a bit. But I think Chiggy's maybe worth investing as like the tight end 20, 22, really athletic, really good playmaker after the catch. As they go more pass heavy this year without Derrick Henry, without Mike Vrabel, maybe he benefits from it. So he's a guy I think is worth taking a shot on later in Dynasty startup drafts. All right, so there you have it. You had maybe 8, maybe 18. I don't know where I ended up, but hopefully you guys got value regardless of what the number was. And if you did, make sure you hit the button that looks like this. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you are new, and we'll be putting out videos like this pretty much daily on this channel, but also for your redraft league. So go subscribe to that channel. Those videos will start to be coming out early and often, probably starting this week, if not at the latest the week after this. Love y'all.